coming to you direct from the nerve center of the galaxy's greatest comic. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast.
Borag Thung, Earthlets, and welcome to the latest episode of the 2000 AD Thrillcast Lockdown Tapes. I am your host, Malt Char, and on this episode, we are celebrating 30 years of the Judge Dredd Megazine. Now, I mean, that's an achievement for any comic, never mind a comic that has weathered the storms of the last 3 decades. And Megazine 424 is out now, and it's a really bumper issue. Not only have you got the first instalment of the 2000 AD Encyclopedia, but you've got John Wagner and Colin McNeil back on Dredd. You've got The Dark Judges in Deliverance by David Hind and Nick Percival. There's The Return of the Returners by Cy Spencer and Nicolo Azzarelli. We've got a complete Anderson story by Mauro McHugh and Stephen Austin. And Dan Abnett and Phil Winsley bring us a very special episode of Lawless, which... we're going to be talking to Dan and another guest in a minute about that. On this episode, we've also got the debut of 2 series, which is very exciting. We've got Dreadnoughts, which is Mike Carroll and John Higgins with Sally Jane Hurst on colours. This plugs into the same territory as the Judges novella series that Michael has been writing and been series editor on for a while now. But this is a specific storyline for the Megazine, basically about the creation of Dredd's world, and it is chilling that the Dredd strip continues to be prescient and a warning, not a manual. So we're going to be talking to Mike and to John later on in this episode about that new series. You've also got Megatropolis, which is a beautiful new series by Kenneth Nyman and Dave Taylor, and it's basically Metropolis, the film, meets Megacity 1. And yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. So hopefully we're going to be featuring that on a future episode of the Thrillcast. But yeah, for those of you who've got your Megazine, spoilers, you'll notice that the episode of Lawless is, it's a musical one. So what we decided to do was to talk to Dan about the episode and also a special little surprise that we've got in store for you. So stay tuned for that. I mustn't forget, also out this week, and we are going to be featuring creators from this in future episodes, we've got the Battle Special. Now, Battle, we talked about it before. We had Dave Hunt, the previous editor, on an episode of the Thrillcast. You know, no battle, no action, no 2000 AD, no 2000 AD. So it's going to be great to focus on that. It is a wonderful bumper edition, 100 pages, lots of stuff in there. Make sure you grab that and support that endeavour, because, you know, the specials are a great way to revitalise these classic titles and characters from the 2000, from the Treasury British Comics archive that is now part of Rebellion. And next week, we're going to have a jumping on issue for 2000 AD, Prog 2200. That, again, is going to be absolutely jam-packed, so there'll be more of that, more on that in future episodes of the Thrillcast. So we're going to crack on with an interview with Dan Abnett, and something a little bit different to do with the musical episode in the latest issue of the 2000 AD Megazine.
Sooner or later we're all gonna die, win us our wings and live in the sky. But heavens above, it's all peace and love here in Boomtown.
Boomtown.
2000 AD has always had quite a symbiotic relationship with music, and particularly the music press. So, everyone talks about how early 2000 AD is very punk in its anti-authoritarianism. You've got the heavy metal connection in the 1980s with like Ron Smith designing ZZ Sputnik covers and all that and the other. And then obviously Madness doing the weird version of Judge Dredd music. That was always hand in hand with kind of like the music press, but obviously as the music press has declined, so that has gone away. So I think people kind of forget the amazing cultural connections between music and 2000 AD, but this project brings them back in a very unexpected way. Dan, do you want to explain?
Feel free to make your question, what the hell is going on? Because you can. In the briefest possible terms, let me think. I'm not sure whose fault it was originally, but I'm going to blame Phil Winslade, essentially, or Matt. I'm not going to take that. Anyway, now the point was, obviously, Phil and I have been doing Lawless for the magazine for a good while now. In fact, I think it's the longest consistent thing Phil's ever drawn. It's topping out at 500 pages plus now, and it's been going out. It's getting a great audience from the readership, and we're very basically it's one of those things that he and I are just so happy doing that we're going to keep doing because we keep having great ideas and everything like that. So there is a natural sort of turnover of every now and then we're like, can we think of something to do something sort of inventive or different, or frame an episode in a different way or whatever. And it was the end of last year, before the world ended. The end of last year, just before Christmas, I had submitted the latest episode, which I think was about episode 46, something like that. And in the ongoing storyline of Boomtown, it's post the Months War on the sort of big Alamo last stand of Badrock, and the town is literally rebuilding. So the main meta story, pardon the pun, the main meta story of the series has been the rebuilding of Badrock, and obviously it's a space western. And so one of the things that Phil and I have been eager to do all the way through has been to ruthlessly and unashamedly mine every Wild West trope we can possibly find and get it in the story somehow. And we've got a short list of things we haven't done yet, but everything is possibly there. So we realised that one of the things we'd never done was to have a character who was like the saloon owner, who was the dispenser of both alcohol and wisdom, and the town shrink. The saloon's a major location in the series, since episode 1, and there's been a barman who sadly dies during the Months War, but there's never been a character who is the bar person. So I randomly introduced this character of Bethany, who takes over the saloon as part of the rebuilding process, and that was purely. She was introduced as a means of demonstrating this idea of the town rebuilding and gentrification. We've got a saloon owner, and here is a person representing that character, representing the rebuilding of the town. Now, also, I randomly and spontaneously decided to make her what is known as a drag king. That is to say, she's a female to male impersonator, and she turns the saloon not only into a drinking establishment, but also to a sort of music hall where she performs and she does all these sorts of things. And the reason I did that is because it plays upon two of the big strengths of Lawless as a strip. I feel first of all is that as a Wild West strip, it's incredibly conservative with a small c. It's about these traditional frontiersmen who are easily shocked by anything remotely kind of newfangled and strange and all that kind of stuff. They're very, very old-fashioned outlook. So the idea that this gal is also a guy, and how does that work? And it's all a bit kind of. I thought that was a nice thing to play because it's exactly that sort of slightly transgressive feeling that you might get in a Wild West story. At the same time, one of the other things that's happened in Boomtown is that the SJS has arrived in force to oversee Meta Lawson's control of the free trade town. And the SJS are, let's face it, if the judges are pretty Gestapo-esque anyway, but certainly the SJS are the epitome of that. So there was a sort of inherent feel of sort of 1930s Germany, Weimar Republic, the Gestapo's watching everything, and people trying to thrive under those circumstances. So the idea of having what was something that was very sort of cabaret in this kind of androgynous, transgressive way, I thought was appropriate to the theme. It sort of hit both those themes really, really neatly, and that the SJS would not be very, very pleased with this. And so I was trying to hit those kind of notes, and it seemed to work, and that was fine. And every episode that comes along, I try and think, I try not to make it just the next 10 pages of the story, even though there are story arcs, but I try and find a way of framing it. So that episode before Christmas, I wrote. I thought, how can I frame this issue? And I decided, in a moment of madness, to have Bethany, in her guise as Tony Dancer, on stage, singing a song to the reader, performing to the reader. And it was just one page. And then you turn the page and you realise that she's performing to Meta and she's getting the approval of the judges to carry on. It was less like that. So it was a gag, basically. But in order to do it, I had to write a song. Now, it wasn't a very good song, but I had to write a song. In order to write lyrics that would read off the page without the aid of music as a song, even with the aid of little musical notes beside the speech balloons, I composed a little tune in my head. In fact, I was recording it on my voice memo on my thing, just so I could make the thing scan and rhyme properly and feel like a tune, so that hopefully it would work on the page. And then I sent it in, and I thought, I don't know if Matt's going to go for that. Sorry, Tharg. I don't know if Tharg's going to go for that. Whether I'm going to get that sent back saying, do over, please, not good enough. That's stupid. You can't do a musical in comic terms. Boom. And then I also don't know how Phil's going to react to this, because he's going to go, what the hell have you got me drawing now? But it was accepted. It went on. And then just before Christmas, Phil rang me up for one of our regular chats. And in the course of that, he went, I love doing that musical page. He said, I just thought it was so much fun. It was such a great fun thing to do. Great fun to do. Now, it may have been the approach of Christmas and us not knowing that the world was about to end. But he then said the fateful words, we should do a whole episode like that. And I went, what, a whole musical episode of Lawless? He goes, yeah, all 10 pages, lots of songs. We'd do that. And I went, that sounds funny, thinking that would be funny. That would be quite funny, because that's so counterintuitive and postmodern, and why the hell are you doing music in the one thing that a comic can't really do? Why will you try to do music? So I said, well, I'll ask Matt. And I put it to Matt in an email. I said, we've had this idea, it's very silly. And my suggestion was that we did it this coming Christmas. So we did it a year in advance, and it would be in the December 2020 issue of the Megazine. And that will be the excuse for the kind of end of term silliness. It's a Christmas special where it's let your hair down. We're going to do something silly because it's Christmas. Thinking that he might or may not go for it. And to my surprise, Matt said, that's a really good idea. There's always been, he said, it's sort of exactly what you said. There's been a strong connection between music and 2000 AD, going right back to, the Nemesis, the Warlock, and going underground and all that kind of thing. It's always been there. It's punk. You see, it's like, yeah, let's do it. I said, I've always quite wanted the idea, see the idea of a music. Because I think what appealed to him is what appealed to me is like, it shouldn't happen and it shouldn't work. So, challenge accepted. So, but then he said, don't do it for Christmas. He said, do it for the September issue, because it's the 30th anniversary of the Megazine, which I didn't realise. And I went, oh, great. That's exactly the kind of end of term school holidays rationale, even though I wanted in the story to make it happen in universe. There is an explanation for why it's all happening in the story. It's not just like randomly people singing, which is, of course, what a musical is. But anyway, that's what I was striving to do. So, and then Matt also surprised me by going, and you can have more pages. You can have, 20 pages. And I went, okay then. So I told Phil, and Phil went, great. I think not really realising what was about to happen. And I sat down and I then wrote a script for a 20-page musical. When I did that, and I had to apply the same logic. I wanted almost every major character to have a song. I wanted those songs to be recognisably songs on paper when you read them without the aid of music. And I wanted them to represent a sort of different range of styles, so I could get different dancing sequences going on. So I had to do the same thing. I was like writing these songs very, very simply, recording little tunes, making sure it scanned so I could get it down on the page. And the script was a beast. It was this monster, because it had stage directions, panel descriptions. It had incredibly complex lettering instructions for it. In fact, credit to Jim Campbell for lettering this, because he's done an amazing job. And also, so obviously I was sitting there doing it, and at the time, my daughter Lily was living here with us. She's a drama graduate, and one of her particular areas of expertise is choreography and dance. She's extremely well trained in that. So I was telling her about it and asking her questions, because I wanted her advice about how to describe things in the panel descriptions for Phil to draw. So she was great in terms of almost not choreographing Phil, but choreographing my mind so that I could write things that were useful to him. Anyway, all of that. So at the end of it, we had a script. It went to Phil, and we had songs. And obviously, Lily was aware of this. And I chatting to her. And obviously, Jack, who is with us, is her boyfriend, also a drama graduate with great musical skills. And I said, do you know what? Having gone to the trouble of actually writing some tunes, it would be quite nice if we could sort of record them, so that if anybody was really interested in what these songs were supposed to sound like, they could hear it. And now my intention was simply that we do incredibly simple acoustic, rough versions that were just sort of guides. They weren't meant to be performative at all. They were meant to be rough guides, because I thought, well, I can strum a guitar, and I know Jack, has got a keyboard, knows what he's doing. We can all sing a bit, and we can, and Jack knows how to record things. And they were going, yeah, let's do this. So that was all it was meant to be. It was meant to be a sort of a musical sketch of what the things would have sounded like, so that we could maybe put it on the website, and people read it and go, this is insane, it's a musical in comic book form, oh, you can hear what the tunes are, that's fun. That was all it was supposed to be. And then, of course, pandemic. And at that point, we found ourselves, for better or worse, locked in the same house for a number of months. And Jack and Lily, who essentially nothing they could do. There was no auditions to go to. There was no performances going on. Everything was closed down. Even like waiting jobs and other things they were doing, couldn't do it. They were stuck here. They were stuck in the house with us. It's like, great. So bless his cotton socks. Sorry, Jack. Jack went, I'm going to really put some time and effort into this. We're going to do it. We're going to do it properly. And there was a kind of manic, stir-crazy, cabin fever, obsessional. There's a thin line between compulsive and obsessional, and it's a hyphen. And he essentially decided that there was a perfectionism going on, and he started to sort of upgrade some of his software and get this kind of stuff like that. And suddenly we were like, it wasn't just musical sketches after all. He was doing anyway. So that's why, to my astonishment, we started to get this rather more spectacular version of what we were doing. And Jack can tell more about the detail of this, but he and Lily have contacts in theatre, in music, some West End performers and all sorts of different, a guitarist here and a producer over here and a drummer, all this kind of stuff. So they were reaching out going, could you just quickly record this over Zoom and send it to us? And suddenly it was like, oh my God, this is a full cast performance with, and that, Mike, is what COVID does to people. It's the long-term effects of COVID. But seriously, I don't think it would have ever happened, and we wouldn't have gone that mad if we hadn't literally had. It was a great project. Like some people have cleared out their attics, and some people have painted the back bedroom. We wrote a musical.
Here's the welcome speech for you, sir, and your wife. There's lots of lovely people here who'd like to shake your hand and take your wallet, boots and teeth, and very probably your life. It's the town that puts the drop back into bad rock.
Well, I'm interested to hear from Jack here. So,
please,
we've heard from the madman over there. I want to hear it from your perspective. What happened here, because I don't want to suggest there's been any coercion here.
Absolutely none.
But
incredible amounts. It was exactly that. Really, we had a little talk about. I think originally it was Dan came to me about Boomtown, about the one song, and said, would you be interested in us doing a little piano version of this? And we sat down and he sang it, and then we were like, yeah, of course we can. And then obviously, a few weeks later he comes back and goes, actually now I've written, a whole script of this. I've written a massive amount of, 10 songs, 11 songs. And we go, okay, we can do it. And then he sings them to me. We sat down, he sings them all. We go, no, this is too cool. Like, we should actually really do it justice and put some work into it. And so, yeah, he's right. I don't want to admit it, but he's right. It was, I became an absolute perfectionist, and we, because we were staying near Lily, bless, we're staying with Dan and Nick, and so the little basement ended up becoming the music room, and we put loads of blankets up to try and make a sound booth where we could all go in and sing as ensemble or dance, because Dan sings in Secondhand Heart Blues, and it's, I'm so grateful for it at the same time, because he's right. I would have absolutely lost my mind, and I was losing my mind before it. And to be fair, I ended up losing my mind anyway, but for a different reason.
Well, at least you got something out of it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we've got this. We've got this crazy weird thing that we've ended up with, and so
I have to ask, do you read comics?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good. Right, okay.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Totally kind of like
no.
This is Lily's dad's weird.
No, I do read comics. I do. I am a bit of a massive fan of I love 2000 AD, or all of the comics, Marvel, DC, a lot of stuff. Luckily, I get some amazing stuff from Dan, who just passes them over. No, but I can't complain. But yes, I do. And so it was so amazing to be grateful to like do something with this. But to be fair, like hands in the air, I didn't know a massive amount about Lawless with Dan. I hadn't really read much of Lawless. So before...
That's a very brave thing to admit.
Yeah, I know. I said the hands in the air, please. Don't come for me. But it was incredible at the same time to then sit down and have Dan for half an hour describe the world of Lawless and everything that's happened before and everything that's happening now, which was like incredible. And that itself should have been a podcast, because that was just unbelievable to listen to. And so it just became. I started reading it, got really addicted to it, and just I think we just loved it. We just got crazy with it.
I think. I was going to say some of that explanation was also about characters, because again, originally it was just going to be whichever one of us was available to sing it. So for instance, it wasn't necessarily had to be gender specific. It was just a voice to sing a song. But once it got going, and Jack had entered his perfectionist mode, he was kind of casting it. I've got a friend who would be great as that character. And let's make sure that song is sung by a woman because it's a female character, or that one sung, So it's like, tell me more about this character so I can get the voice right. And that was after a while I was going, oh my gosh, this is rather more complicated than I originally imagined.
Yeah.
It really struck me listening to the tracks. I mean, first off, there is a long tradition in 2000 AD of musical numbers. So John Wagner and Alan Grant, huge fans of musical numbers. You get them in Dredge, you get them in Robo Hunter, all over the place. But so often they are comedic versions of existing songs, whereas this is something else entirely. Do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges of creating something from whole cloth?
Yes. It was a fun thing to do. Weirdly, earlier, back end of last year again, I was writing a comic for Valiant in the States, and it turns out there is an extremely capable rock band called Sound of Thunder who write music that is inspired by Valiant characters. And I was sent randomly this MP3 of a track they'd written for Rye, which is the comic I'm writing, saying, "Could you put lyrics to that?" And I went, "I've never done that before." They have some. I'm not, I believe, in any way particularly musically skilled, but I did learn music. My parents were folk singers. I've got vague musical heritage, but I don't pretend to be any kind of expert. But I wrote some lyrics, and it was fun. So I think that sort of was in the back of my mind, going, "Yes, create." And that was the challenge. It's exactly that. It's one thing to write a song in a comic where it's quite obvious what the tune is supposed to be because it's a famous tune and you're writing funny lyrics to it, which is works really, really well because you can hear the tune and everything like that. But to do it the other way around, where people don't know the tune, and so it was trying to find ways, literally sometimes in the script descriptions for the letterer, it was where to break lines inside of balloons. So we got some idea of the length of a line and the weight of a line and stuff like that. So that the essence. If people read it and they never hear the music, they should at least have some idea that that's a fast-paced song or that's a slow-paced song or that one's got, whatever, metrically, however it's working. And there were some of the songs that I wrote in what might be described as some detail. That is, I had quite a complicated idea for the tune and therefore was able to, and that was some of the first ones that Jack and I worked on. And, sort of I was going to go, well, I can sing you this one from beginning to end. This is how it works. And then obviously he went to work finessing and orchestrating and arranging and doing all this stuff. And sometimes come back saying, that don't work. It needs to be fixed. We need to fix that in a bit of a... But there are also a few of them which are particularly delightful to me because they were the loosest. I put them in because it was almost like a story song. This song has to happen here and has to tell this part of the story. So I had a much vaguer idea about what it was. It was just sort of maybe just a hook, which enabled me to write some dialogue, some lyrics that would work in there. And those are the ones where and we tried to to credit Jack with this really properly, is that he was doing much more than arranging. He was going, so what's this song? The next one we're doing, what's this one? I'm going, wow, actually, I can't sing all of that to you. It kind of I think it's going to kind of go something like this, and it's sort of vaguely, it's slow, or this is blah, blah. And then he would do, so there is, I think, an absolutely magnificent a cappella number in the course of the, please don't kill me. There are with so many genres represented, but there is an a cappella number, which when I wrote it, I didn't intend to be an a cappella number. It was just a song. And Jack, who has experience with a cappella, in fact, Jackapella, I believe.
Oh God, don't do it! Don't do it.
And he said it could be that, and I went, what a great idea, because it actually uses one of his key skill sets about how to arrange it for multiple voices and stuff like that. And I thought also, to me, it's sometimes music can really make you laugh, particularly when it's applied inappropriately. So the idea that the urgency and the drama of this song is done in the form of a cappella takes to me the idea of the basic idea of the musical to its ludicrous degree. It's sort of like Tom Lehrer, where it's inherently funny all of itself. It's not, the lyrics aren't funny, but it's the fact that is happening in that form is the funny part. And so the things like that, where I just said, run with it, do that. And he came back and said, do you think this sounds great? And I'm sitting laughing my socks off, because it is. It's really good. And it's the degree of finish and polish that I think that is. I think it's fair to say that everything is done to the maximum capacity of the technical abilities that we had available to us at the time. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of the a cappella is polished. Some of the backgrounds. In fact, sometimes Jack's perfectionism took him off into. He'd put drums on a track and he'd go, that's not good enough. I need to get someone to actually drum that, because artificial drums don't sound right. And I'm going, I could tell the difference after he'd done it, but at the time I'm going, but it sounds fine. Stop it. You're going mad. So it varied from song to song, to be honest. Some were very structured and some were very, very just sort of sketchy in my mind. And then what I then got back was this extraordinary love. And the fact that in some of them, this should have been my first clue, actually. I think it's the first song, the sort of intro, the sort of, it's the reprise of Boomtown, which is a sort of sad version of Boomtown, where when Jack put it together, he actually put in sound effects like footsteps and the sound of lights going on. I went, oh, wait a minute. He's not messing around. He's gone for the whole theatrical experience here. It's not just music. We haven't got somebody on a penny whistle going, this is what it sounds like, mate. This is complete. So yeah, everything. And sometimes it was one song at a time. So this week he'd be working on this. And sometimes it was multiple at a time. And I was, so yeah, it was fascinating. I think I also, just for the sheer hell of it, learnt so much about the way music works and the way words fit to music and the way tunes fit together, and the same tune can work really, really effectively one way and not effectively at all in another way. And it was revelatory. So it was weird. I'm not going to write a thesis on it or anything though, because.
I don't know. This sounds exactly like something that would come out of a degree, to be honest with you. I'm going to combine comics and musicals. Lecturers just sat there going.
My second-hand heart, it don't beat like it should. My world's gone all bad, where it used to be good.
Jack, tell us a bit about this process, if you can, and coming at it from the point of view of somebody with the experience of musical theatre, etc. How did you go about putting this together?
Well, it definitely, varied in lots of different, depending on the song, and it was really interesting because, honestly, I do have a lot of musical background, but there's not much, background I previously had in terms of writing and arranging music. So this was a massive learning curve for me, as well. And I would meet with Dan, and Dan would, describe to me what the song is, and he'd give me the scripts. And, luckily, thanks to Dan, like he said, there were some amazing stage directions in there, which really helps with, all right, well, This first song is a Boomtown Reprise is quite a song. She's walking on stage and we can hear the footsteps. Then it must be quiet, so it must be deep, and it must be important and quite solemn. That sort of stuff. There's lots of hints that Dan gave in the writing that made things a lot easier. Thank God. But he'd come and we'd sit and he'd sing the song, and I'd record it in my phone, and I'd go away and then just try 100 different ways of it, and eventually we'll hit a song that we really like, or we'll hit a style that we like. I think one of the songs, Marshall Meta Lawson, didn't actually finish, or Lift Up didn't even end. Really, it didn't start the way that it ended. It was gonna be like, I can't even remember what it was gonna be. Like, it was, but it was something a lot less than what we finished with, and we kept, going a step up, and so also really, it's quite interesting to learn that when you come to a comic and music, something that we don't obviously put together, the structure of a song isn't as easy in reference to a comic, because the comic, you've got limited lines, you've got limited amount of words that you can use. We can't be repeating choruses over and over again, which we would get in a song. You'd have verse 1, verse 2, chorus, verse 3, chorus. We don't have time for that, because we need to be progressing when you're reading it. The story needs to be progressing, the plot needs to be continuing, and so that was something in itself that we go, okay, how do we take that and if you're listening to it, how do you keep that interesting for a listener? And so that often depends on the music, or it depends on a bit of a soundscape, or something crazy, or all of a sudden we've got incredible guitar and drums kicking in and somebody's rapping a song that we didn't know. And massive thanks goes there, because most of it has been, me and Dan said that really this is put together with Zoom and sellotape, really, is kind of the beautiful slogan of it. But it's true, most of this has just come from me and Dan talking, and then me sat at a piano, and I'm using any of the software I can. It would be incredible if we could have loads of musicians to come and play all these and make it sound incredible, but lockdown is a thing, and so we are limited to one piano and the beauty of software that we have, but luckily we've got some incredible musicians, Simon Appleson and Sam Roberts as a drummer, who also mixed this, that I played to, and they went, oh, okay, do you know what, I think I want to get in on this. And they'd record it, and they'd send it to me, and then we'll put it together. And so Lift Up, pretty much, actually, is one of the only songs that really is just all musicians. That's really played live, proper music, sent from 5 different homes, coming together and making it sound what it is. So yeah, I'd say that's the process. Pretty complicated.
I'm really interested in the style of the music, because I'm a big fan, particularly of the first season of Westworld. Music plays such a huge role in not just setting the tone like most music does, but also in pushing the narrative, kind of letting what's happening in the story. This is this is a bit more straightforward in that it's a bit more of a traditional kind of musical. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on that interplay of story and song. In what I guess most people would assume is a normal way for musicals,
Yeah, it comes down exactly to the music, really helps you completely understand the feel that you should be having from the get-go. If you take all of the lyrics away and you just hear, like when we see film scores, and when we hear these incredible, like you say with Westworld as well, some incredible saloon music in there when they step into the saloon, and instantly what the vibe is because of the music. And so that's something that we really wanted to try and achieve here with Lawless and this bad rock melody. And so we would talk about different musicals. I think we spoke a lot about Singing in the Rain and a lot of some of the cheesiness, but at the same time how that makes us feel, and as a result, is that the sort of feeling we want to be having? and so we would try and blend that, as it were, as best as it could, of making it feel really excited and you know. Oh, when it comes down to like juxtaposition, though, which Dan exactly said, you know, it's such an important song, Something Up to New Aliens, where they're discovering something is, you know, seriously wrong, and we're singing a really jolly a cappella song about it, you know. and so that's exactly the Dan says. What effect does that have? And that's actually at the same time, if you completely do something that someone doesn't expect, that says something in itself, and that's quite funny, and that's quite crazy, or, you know, Resigned. We said we really wanted Resigned to be. I think me and Dan kind of said that was originally one of the looser songs. I think, and it was more okay. How do we get from A to B? But I think, you know, I watched a Disney movie that evening and realized, you know, with the music there, and we're like, God, that's so, you know, powerful. Crazy, you know, Beauty and the Beast, the very first song, all Belle does is walk through the town, but you've got a 7-minute incredible song that makes you feel something, that, you know. And it was all right, how do we take the, you know, her are we allowed to say plot? Are we allowed to say plot? Describe the plot in this?
Why not? You're allowed to take a big emotional moment.
Yes, how to take a big emotional moment and make the music feel like that, as opposed to just, you know, this, depending on the singing. And we do have some amazing singers, you know, that have lent their voice to it, which really makes it so much better than just music. Without them, it would be, you know.
One of the things I did want to ask about is, well, first off, I am not a fan of musicals. But I was talking about this last time I had done on the podcast. I did theatre and media at university. So one minute I was discussing media theory, the next minute I was prancing around in a Brecht play. So I'm never on board with musicals. I enjoyed Hamilton. Don't get me wrong. I'm not made of stone. But one of the issues I've always had, and there was always an element of snobbery in this, was that an awful lot of musical, that way that musicals have of essentially having a conversation, you know, talking in song rather than necessarily they being song lyrics, I always found incredibly camp and a little bit
yes. Oh God, yes.
But part of what I'm feeling here, having listened to it and having listened to the things that you've said, is that actually you're leaning into that to a certain extent. This is silly in what is I mean, don't get me wrong, Dan. This can be quite a grim series. It can, and in fact, some quite grim things happen even in the context of this episode, which is quite serious. I mean, there's at least two major story points, two big continuity points that happen in the course of the story, and that, I think that was it. I do like musicals, not all musicals, but I'm very, very fond, particularly of classical musicals. But I'm very aware of the fact that they are like everything, like comics. Let's face it, they follow a certain formula. They have their own certain rules. And if you buy into that at the beginning, when you sit down and watch Singing in the Rain or whatever, Hamilton, if you've bought into what's happening, you're lost and you're gone, and that's fantastic. But if you're remotely aware of it, you're going, this is just a really weird way of telling me this story. And so and it was that kind of awareness. The fact that Lawless, of course, shouldn't be a musical in any stretch of the imagination. It's a town where music may occur, but it's not a musical. That's one of the things that I found sort of funny just going into it, was the idea that there would be characters would be breaking into song, and that sometimes it was, so there are some songs. So for instance, quite a lot of the songs that Tony Dancer sings are very much in the style that she would perform them in in her role as a performer. So they were kind of, the music is in character for there. But then there are other the idea of Drury rapping, for instance, like that, or like, as Jack said, the a cappella number over a very urgent thing. It is the sheer incongruity of those moments. And in fact, there is a couple of moments where a couple of characters in the comic strip are going, what the hell is going on? There is a moment of reluctance, for instance, McClure, the most severe hardline SJS character, who gets drawn into it and ends up singing a verse. But you could tell that this is like, I don't know what's happening and I don't know why I should be doing this. And I like that kind of peripheral awareness.
you watch something like Oliver, and everybody's going down the street, and everybody's singing, and they're dancing out the windows, and the entirety of London's come to life, and you're going, they've all gone mad. But when that happens in something, and you've got people at the sidelines going, the hell's going on over there? Is that a flash? That is, to me, part of the... And that's what I kind of wanted to do. I kind of wanted some of the songs, which I think Jack has done really, really well, to be completely in the spirit of the character who's singing it. And then some of the songs be so not that was why it was funny. And the song Resigned, which just got mentioned there, which is probably the one I'd worked out least. And it is lyrically by far and away the least funny. There are some of the lyrics of the other songs have got jokes in them and puns and all sorts of good rhymes and stuff like that. But Resigned is completely straight. And that in itself, it is the big torch song number, sort of 3/4 of the way through the musical, that every musical has. So again, I was sort of trying to think of it in terms of the way the musical, that there's always a cheerful number to open, and then there'll be a funny number over here, and then there'll be a love song here, and there'll be that kind of stuff. But there's always, just before you reach the sort of the climax of the musical, there'll always be the main character sings the passionate, often the worst song in the musical, but more often than not also the one that becomes the single, because it's the great passionate, I can bawl my lungs out song. And I went, that should be the song. That's what that needs to be. It's completely serious. What's hopefully funny about it is that it does it with a straight face. And therefore it is inherently funny because it's a joke at the expense of the formula of musicals, not because it's a funny song. And the fact that Jack then went away and wrote a tune that's like, oh, what a wonderful tune, and how beautifully sung. It actually kind of sort of slightly gets you in the way those songs are meant to get you. And I'm going, damn you, we've got them on both directions. It's a metaphysical joke, but it's also quite a good song. And that's what I liked about it. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes it's the juxtaposition, sometimes it's the fact that it's in the spirit of that kind of stuff. And Neris Pettifer's song, which is sort of the big opening number once the introduction's out of the way, is in the strip. She's always been the person who welcomes the settlers to Badrock, and she says, "I've got the welcome. This is the welcome speech." And she sings this song, which is basically is a complete Lionel Bart Oliver type number, where the entirety of the town is singing and dancing around her as she basically welcomes you to Badrock and tells you about all the terrible things that are about to happen to you. And to me, that was really funny, because if Lawless was a musical, that's exactly how it would start. It would be cheeky chappies, it would be chim chimney, and you've got to pick a pocket or two, and all that sort of stuff in a Western style. That's how it would open. And the idea of her marching down the street with a chorus of townsfolk behind her, all singing and dancing in step, to me was inherently funny. I think if you're a cold-hearted bastard and you don't like musicals, Michael, which I'm sure. And that's totally fine. And I think there is going to be quite a lot of people in our target audience group who go, musicals, I don't like musicals. Then fine, just read the comic. Do you know what I mean? But if you don't like musicals, but you don't like musicals because you've seen enough of them to find their formula weird, then I think you might appreciate the structural humour. Do you see what I mean? Is that whether you like something or not, if you know what it is, you're going, that's why that's quite funny, because that shouldn't work that sort of way. And I don't know. It was like I said, when I was writing it, even though I thought this is a technically ambitious thing to try and do, before I even realised there would be an audio accompaniment, just writing it, I was going, this is kind of crazy. Okay, the excuse is it's the 30th anniversary, but it was a fun technical exercise. We've got to the point now where, thank God, we've got COVID to blame for it, where we're going, that got out of hand really quite a lot. that escalated quickly, and therefore we can sort of in hindsight go, yes, and of course we intended this one to be this, that, and the other. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, it's like you either like it or you don't. And I think my main concern now is that the readers and everybody who experiences this appreciate the incredible efforts and volunteer efforts of everybody who contributed to it, because they didn't have to. Jack obviously particularly, because he was right at the heart of it for weeks and weeks and weeks. But everybody who sang and played an instrument, it was like they kind of didn't have to. There was a kind of theatrical bonding where everybody went, that sounds like fun. Why don't I do it? Like Jack was saying about the guy who did the sort of producing of it, who listened to the drums and went, yeah, that's as good a drum line as you're going to get on that, just using synthesized drums. I'm just going to drum it for real. And he didn't have to do that, but he did it because he was going, I've kind of got caught up in the spirit of this. And that to me was a rather wonderful thing. I think, to be honest, he says, speaking in a more general term, during lockdown, all around the country, people have applied that same kind of holistic logic to all sorts of different projects, some of which have got equally out of hand. But you know what I mean? Just sort of whatever it is they're doing, you know, sort of fly fishing in the Scottish Glens, or whatever they've done it with a greater joie de vivre than they would normally have done, because it's the thing that's filling their time. And that was quite an exciting thing to see here. During the course of the summer, when I'm sitting here writing whatever today's script is, and an email will pop up, and Jack had just sent me the latest thing he got in. I was going, that's just brilliant. Kind of, they didn't have to do that, but isn't that amazing? And I think it's sort of a testament to how it's the testament to how the devil finds work for idle hands, probably. I don't know. I was going to a really good place and I just fell off the end of the runway.
I need to ask Jack, really, was there ever a point where you went, I'm trapped in a house with this guy?
Yeah. Well, there was one. I think Brotherly Gets It Done. And I kept sending him versions, and he was like, it got to a point, you know, where the first few times I'd send him some songs, he'd be like, this is amazing. Thanks, you know, great, love it. And then the more we got on, the more, you know, professional it became. And it was like, I think this can be better, you know. You know, when Brotherly Gets It Done, we had a few of those. It's not quite the tune, you know, or it's not quite this, but like, God, you know, he's absolutely right. It was so much fun, like, and you know, we all know what it is. We know what it is. It's just a laugh. We did it because we had time, and we went, you know what? Let's have a bit of fun with this, and everyone getting involved. Exactly, all the singers, you know, the mixer, Sam, you know, Lily, who did help choreography and ended up doing vocals as well. It honestly just became this absolute, you know, team of let's just have a bit of fun, and let's just you know, do some crazy songs to a comic that you would never expect.
I've been thinking about my time, all of the things I've done, saving this grud darn town with my cat and my badge and gun. And you've done an amazing job. You're a hero to everyone. What are you trying to say? 'Cause it sounds like you want to run. I do want to run Everest.
And you know, that to me comes down to Dan for, you know, wanting to do, and obviously Phil, and wanting to do this whole thing start with, which is just crazy.
I blame Matt.
But yeah, I want to do it again now. You know, what's the next one? What's the next one?
Yeah, if you've got any 2008 strips that want a musical version of it, obviously we've got the, you know, I've got a barn, Jack's got a double bass, we can put the show on here. But it's interesting, actually, the song that Brotherly Gets It Done that Jack is referring to there was actually the toughest. It was the one that he actually started working on very early on, and it was the last one to get finished. It took the whole time, kept coming back to it and fiddling with it. But that was one of the learning experiences, because it was one of the ones where I had written it in my head with a very specific tune. It's one of the very specific ones that I've done, that I sort of know, this is the tune, it's a fine tune, let's just go and do that. And every time we looked at it, or Jack said, I've done this version of it, for some reason it wasn't working. And that's how I learned more about music, because I realised that there was absolutely nothing wrong with my tune, but because of the key that we were obliged to produce it in, it was really difficult to reproduce that melody easily and match things to it, which is like, enters into realms of music that I don't understand. And what Jack was trying to do was shift it and shift a few bits within it, which altered the tune slightly, but it was still fine. So I was trying to forget what I'd originally thought of and appreciate what he'd done with it, which was absolutely great. But it was interesting because the fact that it was the one where we kept going, what is wrong with this? I don't know why we can't get it. Actually taught me more about musical arrangement. And the fact that just because you can whistle something doesn't mean to say that is perfectly replicatable, because it made harmonizing and everything like that really difficult because of the key that it was in. But it was a really interesting experience, which I'm sure drove Jack absolutely bananas. But there you go.
listening to the tracks, it kind of occurred to me just how well it works. You know, we talk about how crazy it is that you've done this, but it does. You know, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say it does work. And you know, you think back to the history of musicals, and so many of them, the classic ones, are westerns. You know, Paint Your Wagon, Oklahoma, Annie Get Your Gun.
You know, Seven Brothers.
Yeah. You had that amazing moment that I was obsessed with when I was at uni of Clint Eastwood, the archetypal man with no name, you know, the cowboy singing "I Talk to the Trees."
Yes, yeah. I think, is that not the same film where Lee Marvin sings "I Was Born Under a Wandering Star" as well? Is that not, or is that, I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure Paint Your Wagon, yeah.
Yeah. Which is, yes, ridiculous. I think that helped, to be honest. I think the idea of the close association of musicals in their classic American form as an offshoot of quite often of westerns. That sort of swirling petticoats and people with hats and, you know, sort of, and standing in cornfields being all sort of lonely. That, to me, was a very obvious step to take. So that it could have been a very Seven Brides for Seven Brothers Oklahoma type musical, but once it got going, it's like, yes, but there's got to be an element of cabaret in there because of Tiny Dancer, and actually, it's almost, we don't want to do this too straight. We don't want to do it in the generic way that it should be. One of the things that would be quite fun is if we have completely out of place and inappropriate songs in it. So we have a rap, we have a sort of rock song, we have an a cappella number, like I said, which still, it makes me laugh because that one shouldn't be a cappella, but it's brilliant. And also that we have a very Lionel Bart Oliver-esque number to open with. We have a what I think of as a sort of very Fred Astaire or Thoroughly Modern Millie song and dance number with Brotherly, you know, sort of the big showmen, sort of all tap dancing and this kind of stuff. It's like every single genre. Let's kind of hit every single one. But yes, that fundamental Rodgers and Hammerstein, the Western musical, which is bedrock, I think, of the musical canon, was I think lurking there for a long time. And thank God he didn't give me 30 pages because.
Yeah.
I mean, I do hope you realise what a mess you've made of the trade of this, because either we've got to put a fucking CD in it, or there's got to be some links like QR codes. Don't make us use QR codes.
Yes, but but on top of that, what a wonderful, because your trades have always got, you know, sort of behind the scenes sketches and samples of the script, and we can actually now have, you know, full lyrics and sleeve notes in this particular trade. So what the hell?
I was thinking you could have it like one of those musical greetings cards. Song.
Yeah.
I feel like I've just made a rod for the journey.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So I just want to ask Jack, have you got a taste for this now? Is this a potential future career? Is musical comic books for you?
Honestly, like absolutely. You know, I've spoken to Dan about this at the end of it when we finished it and we sat down and listened to it all, and I said, I really honestly loved this. Like, I didn't, you know, I thought it'd be fun, but I was honestly surprised myself at how much I really enjoyed it, and really enjoyed working with Dan, and really enjoyed working with musicians and hearing, like, you know, because, you know, a lot of these people singing are close mates of mine and stuff that, you know, I've done work and stuff with before, but to be able to, you know, hear all my friends and like everyone, you know, sing these songs as well, and it's, I don't know, it's a different feeling that I haven't experienced before, and it's something I really do want to keep doing. Like, you know, if whether it's another musical comic or it's a musical or it's, you know, anything, or it's just songs, this is definitely something that I think, you know, I don't want to give up on, because it's just too much fun. It's just too much fun. Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly people talk about comics being a collaborative medium. And this is certainly a way of adding an entire extra layer of collaboration. I mean, can you imagine the creator listings on the front of a musical graphic novel.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's extraordinary. Yes, yeah, but it is collaborative. I mean, I think it, in the best possible sense, there was a sense of sort of collaboration run wild because people were literally sitting around going, "I've got nothing to do. Oh, that sounds like fun," and I think that's a lovely process, and collaboration. You know, comics are a team sport, so why not make the team a little bigger when there are people around to do that? And I think quite apart from Jack wanting to do more musical comics, which I think is great, and I'm going, I don't know whether I want to become the guy who's famous for writing musical comics, but it does make me go, I kind of want to write more songs and musicals, and they don't have to be. Do you know what I mean? God, it was sort of. For me, it was sort of easy because I had my subject matter there. I had characters that I knew, and I went, like, how can I put this into musical form? So I don't think I'm about to become the next Lin-Manuel Miranda or anything like that. But nevertheless, it's kind of like, it's quite addictive. It's quite an addictive thing to do. It's like, what can I can think about doing that and something. I don't know. It was a fun thing, but it's collaborative and it's complicated and you end up with a sort of for some reason I'm thinking of a line in Spinal Tap where they're standing at Elvis's grave where they go to some sense of perspectives. You go, too much fucking perspective. It's like, how many of us lost our summers to this?
I mean, to be quite frank, you've both been far more productive during COVID than your spare time than I have. Been mostly staring out the window, wishing the heating was back on. Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. And I do look forward to Judge Dredd the musical coming out of the second lockdown or whatever over the next few months.
To be perfectly fair, that it would probably be Sinister Dexter the musical, because I remember the other day that way back in like the 4th or 5th ever episode of Sinister Dexter 25 years ago, I did write a song that Demi Octavo sang on stage. And I'm going, I have done this before. It was never, but I thought, I think I can still remember the tune. So maybe, there you go. But yes. Stop me before I do it again.
If you need rescuing, blink 3 times. Well, thank you to Dan and to Jack for talking about the musical episode of Lawless in the Megazine. If you go along to 2000ad.com/news, you will find a post about not just the episode itself, but also all the music to go with it, so you can listen along as you dive into Lawless. Now, as I said at the beginning, one of the other series that's debuted in this magazine, 30th anniversary magazine, is Dreadnoughts, which is a series that plugs into the novella series by Michael Carroll, and it really explores how Judge Dredd's world came about and the people who are not just enforcing the law, but also the people who are affected by the law. So it was great to be able to talk to Michael Carroll and to series artist John Higgins about this. It's been in the pipeline for a while, so it's not too terrifying that events seem to continually catch up with it. But it was great to talk to Mike and to John about this brand new series from the Anniversary Meg.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, it's just so weird to sort of like see at least 2 comics people's faces. I mean, usually you've had at least 3 conventions at this stage.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's very, very strange. I do find it really weird. I'm actually quite enjoying lockdown in a way, because I'm finally getting to concentrate on Dreadnoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, last year was a great year for traveling. I mean, I went to so many conventions, and there were conventions I could not turn down.
Yeah.
You know, there was South Africa and Malta and Athens and Birmingham, and I couldn't turn them down. So yeah, it's really weird to this year, and as I say, it is great to actually finally get stuck into Dreadnoughts, and I'm enjoying it so much. I mean, I don't know if you've spoken to Mike about it before, but it's like the in-depth characterization that Mike's getting into is really, really interesting. He's always done great characterization anyway, but to actually sort of like do it this way, it's really, really interesting. It's a bit sort of like CSI almost in one way, but obviously the whole aspect of democracy and the judges taking over, it's really interesting. But the characters I find really, really interesting. I mean, initially I didn't like Glover because she arrived like someone pissing into a tent rather than pissing out of a tent.
Yeah.
And then obviously it got really, she arrived, well, definitely with like iron shod hooves, basically.
Yep.
And she like hit the ground running, and she upset everyone, which is exactly a good way to go into it. So Mike, take it away. I'm assuming we're talking about it now, are we?
yeah, absolutely. I've started recording, so that's.
Okay.
I mean, let's kind of dive into it really, because this series has been in the works for a while. It was, I believe, originally slated to start at the beginning of the year.
Originally slated to start in March of last year. It was the first time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but the fact that we've kept it until now because we knew how bad the world situation was going to be. We wanted to dovetail in with that. Yeah. It's really strange. Well, who was I talking to about? I'm talking about this with someone recently, where this is one of the lines in the first episode. I think it's one of the last lines in the first episode of Dreadnoughts. It refers to that if something strange goes on for long enough, it just becomes the new normal. And that was a phrase that I came up with 2 years ago. But that wasn't in common usage until COVID-19 kicked in. So it's another example of us, of 2000 AD predicting the future, which happens every second time we do it. But yeah, it was strange. But I've had a blast writing this stuff, and I think John seems to be enjoying it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I've found, so like Sally is obviously the colorist, and it's like we obviously work incredibly close. And she gets slightly frustrated that I keep giving her something different to do with the colouring. I mean, she's like a computer whiz, and she really gets stuck into it, no problem. But I'm trying something new this time. It's something I was asking a lot of people about, lots of other artists, to try and sort of like find out the best way of doing it. And it just technically, you use a multiply channel. Probably Mike might know, but it's like if you use a multiply channel, it gets rid of all the white, and you just have the tone. And I'm really been juggling with that, and it's a really, really fun thing to do. Except obviously, as we know, it's like if you're starting to do anything on layers, you have to make sure you're working on the right layer.
Right layers,
and I'm not really used to sort of like working on that many layers. Sometimes Sally gives me a file with something like 50 layers. Sometimes with just a highlight of an eye or something like that.
Yeah.
But, doing it this way, I'm really enjoying it because I can really work into the black and white line. And I've got some sketches here that you might be able to see.
Ooh.
That's some sketches. This is for the latest episode. So I'm enjoying these. And I don't know if you can tell, but there's a lot of grey. I'm using a lot of grey rather than just line rendering. So I'm actually being able to, I think, be a bit more fluid about the way I'm depicting the characters. And the thing I'm enjoying about the main character, Glover, which Mike will probably tell you about in a moment, the thing I'm really enjoying about Glover is the fact that I've always had a problem, unless you're a genius like, Bolland or someone like that, or Adam Hughes, who can do beautiful women with line. I've always had a problem doing beautiful women in line, but having a bit of tone has just really softened the faces up a bit. I mean, one of the things is every artist knows is once you start putting line rendering onto female faces, they tend to age. And that's always a problem because you don't want a young, beautiful woman to look lined and, stressed out. So to use tone, it's been a lot more interesting because then you have a softer face. But the character Glover is a really interesting character that Mike's come up with. And what I like about Glover is the fact that she's hard-assed, but really, really, there's something appealing about her. And I think the way Mike's depicted her in the writing is an interesting female character. I don't think I've dealt with this sort of female character before.
Yeah, with Glover, I tried to avoid the stereotypes of the tough female woman who basically are all based on Ripley, because that's the way it's so often done. So without spoiling too much, we've given her a bit of a bit more of an edge, but from an angle that you wouldn't normally expect, I think. And we'll see that in book 2. We see a lot more of her life outside the department. But yeah, it's interesting because I'm writing Dreadnoughts at the same time as I'm doing the Judges books, so which are kind of the same, well, in the same, sort of in the same area of the universe. So I know very specifically what's coming up in Dread's world, or if you like, the Judges world. But we're still way back in the 2030s for Dreadnoughts, whereas we're moving into the 2050s now. So I know what's coming up, and I know how horrible things are going to get. But yeah, it's been a huge amount of fun being able to focus on a character like this. Because of the Judges novels, they skip ahead a decade every set of 3 books. With Dreadnoughts, hopefully we'll be able to stick around a bit longer, and then we don't have the feeling that the characters are transient. They are basically, we're going to see repercussions to their actions. That's good fun. And the great thing about working with someone like John is that he and I know each other really well. So I know the sort of horrible things he likes to draw, and I like writing them. So between the two of us, we're going to do some pretty intense stuff, I think. But no spoilers, of course. But yeah, it's what he's done so far. I've seen the first 4 episodes, and it is gorgeous. I could give you a preview now, but I won't because that's spoilers. But it's absolutely gorgeous stuff. So yeah, I'm very pleased with the way this is going.
Let's go back to Brass Tacks on this. This is a series that, as you say, does plug into the same idea as the Judges prose series that you've been doing with Rebellion, and this is very much the kind of the earliest beginnings of Dread's world. So, although there are Judges, although there is Fargo and a Justice Department, this is prior to the Atomic War. It's prior to so many of the elements that we assume. It's much more recognizable as a United States. I mean, wow, yeah, much more recognizable as a United States of America that we know now. Do you want to explain a little bit behind the idea of this series? Because one of the ways in which Dread as a series, as a character, has grown, it has been sometimes a flagrant disregard for continuity. The replacement of elements, and you get something like Origins by John and Carlos that comes along and adds some meat to those bones. But this is kind of going even further back, isn't it? And a kind of almost like a micro history of that change.
It's actually not going further back. We start in the first Judges book starts 2031 or 2 or something like that, just when the first Judges are hitting the streets. That's halfway through Origins, more or less. But what John and Carlos did with Origins was basically set up a series of milestones in the history of Mega City 1 and the Department of Justice. And what we're doing with the Judges books and with Dreadnoughts is filling in some of the gaps. We're not trying to fill in everything because we can't. There's just decades of stuff to do there. So we're touching on individual elements. And rather than try and write in general, we're not trying, with the Judges novels in particular, we're not trying to write big earth-shattering stories where the entire fate of the universe hangs on the decisions of one judge. It is more down to earth. It is going to be more gritty cases. I mean, the best way to look at it is that the stories are going to be closer to the 2012 Dread movie rather than the Stallone movie, where the whole fate of the city hangs in the balance in Stallone's movie, but in the Carl Urban movie, it's just a day in the life of a cop. And that's more or less what we're looking at, sort of everything from the ground level, looking up at the spires of Mega City 1 rather than being in the Department of Justice peering down on people below. So yeah, street level, and that's why we have we have more basic problems to solve. It's not going to be always going to be marauding alien robots. It is going to be corrupt cops or judges or society starting to break down. Of course, we get our inspiration by looking out the window. Whereas you used to be able to get your inspiration by reading science fiction novels, and now we just have to watch the news. So yeah, the Judges and the Dreadnoughts start with the idea that America is disintegrating, and the Judges are brought in as a kind of a desperate measure to try and keep everything together, to keep society from falling apart. And it's one of the cases where we're arguing, is the cure worse than the disease? And but we know, of course, that if ultimately Megacity 1 evolves, the Department of Justice turns into what Dread is used to. So the argument is answered, I think. That the solution is worse than the problem ultimately. But that's what you get when you chase short-term solutions. You never get long-term solutions if you only go after the short ones. So ultimately, society, it doesn't necessarily fall apart, but society evolves or devolves, depending on your viewpoint, to the point where the judges on the streets are initially an abomination, because they've totally done away with the concept of due process. But that becomes, as we said earlier, becomes the new normal. We will get to the stage soon enough in the judges' novellas where the cops are in the minority, and there's a few hangers-on, which is important because they are the eyes of the reader, if you like. They're the viewpoint. But with Dreadnoughts, we're able to focus on very specific characters and very specific situations, and that's been tremendous fun, because we're looking at Judge Glover, who's fresh out of the academy, arrives in a situation in a smallish city, Boulder, Colorado. I wanted to have a city that didn't have skyscrapers because it would look different and feel different, and it would have a different sensibility. So she arrives in the middle of a demonstration, and she just goes in and kicks some bottoms without realizing the full nature of the situation. But whatever she does is legal because she's a judge. So if she comes in a bit heavy-handed, that's still within the law. She makes the law.
I think that's the thing that I found really weird. I mean, I think both Mike said, in fact, this could have been written last week or a couple of months ago. And it's so relevant. I mean, it's like rioting in American cities. That's going on at the moment. I mean, obviously in lockdown and the pandemic, I mean, the idea is like fixed penalty notices being handed out on the judgment of the individual policeman, and so on and so forth. I mean, small liberties and small processes are slowly eroding away at certain values that we care about. The big issue, obviously, is how the judges arrive and how they stay here. And I think the interesting thing will be how do they stay here? How do they end up becoming so embedded into the society of the future, 10, 20, 30 years in the future, that you can't get rid of them? I mean, I think the great thing about Dread is the fact that he's always the instigator. Initially, he seems like he's someone who's completely and utterly different to any other judge on the street. The great thing about Glover is she comes in and she's just a judge on the street initially, and it seems like she can't step beyond a certain point. And again, without giving away certain plot points, she is starting to show an integrity that's certainly reflective of the single-mindedness of Judge Dredd, and compared to some of the other judges who, as explained in the script, came from a cop background. They were originally policemen or lawyers or whatever. And there's something about, and again, we're not going to talk about it at this particular point, but the reason that Glover is different will be explained towards the end of the first series. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite chilling in a way when we look out the window and see read what is happening. And I'm lucky. I mean, I don't look on a city street, but being in the depths of the inner city of Dublin over there, I mean, I can imagine outside is hell's going on out that window, Mike.
Yeah, it's been tough. I have to mow the lawn. That's it. But yeah, when we wrote it, when I first bounced the idea of Dreadnoughts around, I mean, it was quite a while ago. I wrote the script. It was 2 years. So, in a time that between then and now, in the 2 years, America has really changed. Are we allowed to use the phrase "gone down the toilet"? I'm not sure, but it has really. Everything's polarized. There was a news story this morning of a police officer, I think it was, or deputy in the States, who has just been fired because excessive use of force. He stopped a car. He demanded that the passenger of the car show his ID, and the passenger said why, and that was all it took for him to be dragged out the car and get the face punched off him. Can we take a guess as to which colour the people involved are? America's an apartheid system at the moment, almost. It's insane, but this is the sort of thing that when you look back, we're going to go, how did we not see this coming? And with Judge Dredd and the world of Judge Dredd and every story within Judge Dredd, it isn't meant to predict the future. It's meant to be a warning more than anything else. This is not how things should be. Dredd is not the good guy. The judges are not the heroes. They might do heroic actions individually, but ultimately they are stormtroopers. And of course, a lot of people will, see the good that Dredd does and go, "Hey, he's a champion." But is he a champion of the people or a champion of the system? That's the question that we're kind of asking with this. We are setting up the situation that allows Dredd to be to come to being in not just into power, but how it becomes viable for the Department of Justice to decide. Ordinary people aren't good enough. We need to make judges. We need to grow them in a vat. So that's what we're doing with Dreadnoughts. We're basically laying the groundwork for that. But of course, the real world is actually laying the groundwork for us, and we're just kind of copying them. It is crazy over there. Yeah.
I mean, there is a point there that I want to dwell on quite a bit, which is that it's something that George Orwell talks about with satire, that it can sometimes let people off the hook. Mm-hmm. Because it could be silly and it can be frivolous and it can be it can be wild and when you think about the satire of somebody like Jonathan Swift, which is very pointed but very fantastical, but satire is always meant to be about now, and particularly when you have sci-fi satire, which is basically what Judge Dredd is. It's not a prediction; it's a warning about where we are now. So whether it was in 1977 or whether it's in 2020, it's still warning about that slippery slope and the satire, the criticism of the law and order agenda that has been with us for knocking on for 50 years now. John, you were the artist on the story that really got the ball rolling in terms of very pointed satire of Dredd's system in relation to democracy and freedom, which was called Letter from a Democrat. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your feelings in hindsight with that story, also how this relates to the work that you're doing now on Dreadnoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's the collected edition that's coming out. I think it's the overriding thing is called America, isn't it? The collected edition of all the Democracy series, and Less from a Democrat and Revolution, the two series that I did are collected in that as well. And I remember getting the script from John when I did Less from a Democrat, and there was an edge to it that I'd never experienced, and I'd only done like half a dozen Judge Dredd stories at that stage, but there was something about it. I mean, all the stories were wonderful and interesting. I mean, Beggar's Banquet about cannibals in the Undercity and so on and so forth. That's what I expected the future. And the great thing about Less from a Democrat was the fact that it really was now or then, or it is now. It's still completely and utterly relevant. I mean, there would be people fighting for democracy. I mean, just a couple of years ago, we had the Arab Spring, and to a certain extent, you can imagine Letter from a Democrat being completely and utterly a true life story written for that particular period. And I enjoyed, one, the fact that it didn't have a happy ending. You know, I like the fact that there's a realism to it. And two, I just loved the dialogue that's like John put in there. And it is one of my favourite quotes of all time from Dread, which is sort of like, let this be a lesson to you, citizen, democracy is not for the people. And that's the great thing, and the dialogue that Mike's coming up with within democracy, the Dreadnoughts, is you have that relationship between the reader, the viewer, and the characters on the page. So Letter from a Democrat is, you know, it's got that wonderful slide. Thank God for me to be the lucky artist to be invited along to do that one, and to be there right at the very beginning. And thank God, it's like to be here 40 odd years later and still loving the fact that I'm doing very strong stories that are relevant and satirical, but there's a truth and a depth to them. And that's the great thing about like Dread, and that's the reason why creators and the fans love him, is because we know he's not a hero. We can root for him because sometimes the villains are 10 times worse than Dread. But within the context of that world, we know it's a completely flawed system. And all you need is one bad arse, you know, a judge that is not as pure as Dread. And everything will go to pot. You know, the idea of like, you know, the citizens accepting that brutality is just, how do we get from Dreadnoughts to, you know, the world of Dread, you know, when it's pure and, you know, that mailed fist in the leather green glove.
Well, there's some interesting stuff I've been reading recently by a guy called Tom Popinski, about who writes a lot about Malaysia, which is characterized as a semi-authoritarian state. And you know, there's the trappings of democracy, but actually everything is controlled by the one party, etc., etc., etc. I'm not an expert on Malaysia, but reading up on what he's been writing, and he talks about the banality of authoritarianism, which plugs into Hannah Arendt's Origins of Totalitarianism, which again talks about the banal bureaucracy of the final solution during the Second World, prior to the Second World War and into the Second World War, and it's that notion of, you know, as you say, Mike, the kind of boiling frog situation where, you know, the water heats up and you just get used to it. For the vast majority of people, actually, they probably could live under the rule of the judges because it is something that they have gotten used to. I want to dwell a little bit actually on this point. You both brought it up about Dread as an exemplar, as somebody who sometimes in stories can be seen as the good guy. Now, Martin Barker, who has written an awful lot about action and 2000 AD, and specifically about Judge Dredd, in his research found a whole spectrum of political views around Dredd as a character and around the idea of the judges. And I wanted to get your views on whether people do always get that that satire, whether they do always understand that the judges are monsters, or whether they're kind of, it's easy to be seduced by the notion of the good tyrant, or, you know, the good badass in the kind of Dirty Harry mold. Mike seems to have switched his Zoom background to a true dystopia. But yeah, I'll start off with you, Mike. Your feelings on that, whether, particularly in the context of a strip like Dreadnoughts, which is looking at the origins of justice system, whether it is easy for the satire to get missed, I guess.
Yeah, I do think it is easy. So some people really do only look at the surface of a story. Some people can look at the ingredients of a bubblegum wrapper and unwrap the mysteries of the universe, and so on, as we know from Lex Luthor's quote in Superman the movie. If you aren't expecting if you aren't expecting layers and depth in a story, you aren't necessarily going to find them. And depth is something that the reader takes out of a story much more than the writer puts into it. I say writer, I should say I'm very biased. I mean creator, not just the writer. But it's confirmation bias. You find what you're looking for, and then you stop looking. People look at Judge Dredd as a story about a hero cop who is basically a prototype superhero almost, and that's what he is, if that's what they want to find. But if you want to find nuance and resonance, then you can look at not so much deeper, but from a different angle. Some of my all-time favorite Dredd shorts are from John Wagner's pen, and The Finger of Suspicion is a comedy story. It's about a guy who basically gets his middle finger trapped and locked into a position where it's upright all the time, and of course he looks like he's giving everybody the finger, and he keeps getting beaten up for it. And it's a hilarious story, but on the surface it's a comedy. But if you look at it from a different angle, it's actually a horror story. And I tried to do that with one of mine. I'm not sure if it succeeded. Can't remember what the story was called, but it's about a perp gets arrested, locked to a holding post, and then the judge is killed before they can call it in. So the perp is stuck there on the holding post, waiting for something to happen. Passers-by they're leaving them there because they go, well, I'm not getting involved. These are judges. And that could be a horror story or it could be a comedy, depending on how you look at it. So people do sometimes miss the satire and in Judge Dredd. If you look at the Apocalypse War, I mean, Dredd's a monster in that. In the end, he basically nukes East Meg 1 because that will be a warning to the rest of the East Meggers not to push the luck any further, which is a horrible thing to do. But from his justification, it's necessary because East Meg 1, yes, a lot of innocent people died there when he did that. But if they hadn't done that, after Mega City 1, they would have moved on to Texas City, Mega City 2. They would have gone to, I don't know, wherever else was in throughout the rest of the world. From Dredd's point of view, this horrible, horrible act was ultimately an act of good. So again, viewpoints. It's all through scale and perspective and perception. I mean, I've had people tell me that they think Dredd is great, but he should blow away more badasses, and I'm going, right? Is that what you want from a comic? Because in that case, you should be reading. I don't know. I'm going to say The Punisher, but to be honest, it's been about a decade since I read The Punisher. If you want someone who's just blown away the bad guys, then read comics like that. But Dredd does have and the subtlety that's not caught by a lot of people, I think, but it's not not missed by that many. It isn't about Dredd. Isn't about the character of Judge Dredd. It's about the people, the victims, if you like, the citizens. The stories have always been much more effective when we can see the input, or the result of the input from Dredd himself, which is possibly why Judge Dredd as a character is glacial to change, because if he doesn't change, then the city has to change to suit him, and that makes him more of a force of nature than a man, really, even though he is still quite human. Does that make any sense at all? I think I've gone somewhere with that, but I'm not sure anybody was following me.
I think, yeah, I mean, you think both the mics are right, actually, and I think one of the things that a lot of the fans that I talk to about Dredd, I mean, I'm very fortunate in a way. I don't know if it's the same with writers, but being an artist, you tend to get interest from a lot of young people. And I enjoy the fact that like young people come up and they're interested in the art. And they do like it. I mean, the great thing about Dredd, I think there's a lovely crossover, strangely enough, because a lot of young women appreciate Dredd in a way that's like other characters aren't appreciated by young women. So they see the satire in a way, I think, a lot earlier than young men. I'm generalising here, but I think a lot of the young fans I tend to meet, the thing that they do like about it is the action, the violence, and the uniform on Dredd in particular, and the fact that he's going to be fighting monsters who are wonderful, disgusting, horrific, violent. That's the aspect that will appeal to a lot of young fans because it's an adventure. It's a video game to a certain extent. I mean, that's more or less 90% of all the video games I've ever seen advertising. I don't play them, unfortunately. I just never do any work. I never get Dreadnoughts finished. But I think the great thing about, as we found, like a lot of the fans grow up with Dredd, and when they get to a certain stage and they understand the satire a lot more, and they understand the fact that this is a flawed society with a totalitarian approach to law and order, they appreciate that aspect of it. And it's that discovery thing. That's why Dredd, for me, in my opinion, has lasted that long. Because he's so many, him and his world, or he and his world, they just have that sort of like interchangeable. You can do humour with Dredd. You can't imagine, to a certain extent, doing humour with the Punisher, unless Garth Ennis is writing him. And then it's usually pretty sick humour. But the great thing about Dredd is I always see him as like Mr. Spock in Star Trek. He might be the centre where the humour is unfolding, but he's not the funny one. It's the fun is all around him. The only thing we know about Dredd is the fact that the violence starts with him and usually finishes with him. So yeah, I think it takes a while for young people to fully appreciate the subtleties of, I can use that word in relationship to Dredd, but there is subtleties in the stories that Dredd exists in and the world that he exists in. So I think it does take a while, but I think the thing that's what people love about Dredd is the fact that he's such a faceted, the world is such a faceted world. I don't know if Mike would agree that Dredd is a faceted character, but certainly the world he exists in is.
Well, let's bring this back to Dreadnoughts, because this is the beginning of a new series. It's a new character. It's been in development for a while, and what's happening in America right now has not come out of nowhere. It has been brewing. You've only got to look at the situation in Ferguson and Charlottesville, and stretching back to well before then as well. Does it, Mike? Does it ever give you pause that, or are you ever worried that writing this kind of dystopian satirical sci-fi in a recognizable situation might in some way be perceived as making light of what's happening?
Yeah, that actually is a problem. Because comics have a fairly lengthy turnaround time for sometimes. We don't want to find a situation where our an issue with a particular event is coming out at the same time that happens in the real world, as we know has happened quite recently with Dredd himself. We don't want to be seen to be mocking or to be cashing in on what's happening over there or anywhere else in the world. Obviously, America is not the only country in the world where there are riots and demonstrations and so forth. We don't want to trivialize what's happening in the real world. We want to, in a way, hold up a kind of I'm going to say a mirror to it, but it's a mirror that's got fractures in it. It's not going to be real. It's not going to be true. It's going to be distorted, because that's the nature of fiction and science fiction. We're using the real world as a springboard in a way, but again, hopefully not disrespectful. We don't want to trivialize anything that's happening in the real world. There are cases where there's examples of serious police brutality, where people are getting the living poo beaten out of them on a daily basis for various reasons. But there are also cases, of course, of the police being the victims because the people go crazy and so forth. It's not a one-way thing by any means. We aren't trying to say that that what's happening over there is, oh, it's bad, but look, it could be worse. Here's how bad it could be. We're in a way we're entertainers. We're not supposed to be educators, and we're not meant to be political commentators. But that's sort of happening almost as an afterthought or a side effect. That if we make any references to the real world, they're not necessarily a judgment. They're obviously more an observation, I think. But again, we don't know, because this is our perception, but this reader's perception will be different. People might read Dreadnoughts and go, well, they obviously took this bit from that scene in the real world and this bit from that other part. And in some cases, it might be right. But in general, what we're trying to do is create a coherent fictional narrative that's inspired by real world events to a degree. With all science fiction, you start with a premise and you build on that, or sometimes you start with a premise and work towards it. But what we've got here is we know where we're going towards. We know we're going towards the situation that we see in Judge Dredd, and we're starting where we are now. So that gives us a viewpoint that didn't the previous writers of Judge Dredd World stuff didn't really have. Dreadnoughts is set in 2035. That's only 15 years from now, which, I mean, younger people might think 15 years feels like a long time. Those of us who are now in our 50s are thinking 15 years ago. Hang on a minute. I was already an adult and grown up and everything 15 years ago. And 30 years ago, I was also still an adult. And so 15 years is going to happen like that. It's just going to zip by. And it would be nice to be wrong. It'd be nice to get to the year 2035 and look back and think, oh, we were very bleak with Dreadnoughts. We forgot about how wonderful everything was going to become. But yeah, we don't want to, we really don't want to make light of what's going on. But at the same time, we're not going to ignore it. We can't just pretend that the real world events aren't happening, that everything is going to be a beautiful Pollyanna state and it's going to be sunshine and roses, or milk and honey, or indeed sunshine and honey, whichever combination you like. It's, we're basing this on real stuff. And it means we've got to take it warts and all. So there's going to be bad things happening. And we will, even if we don't directly build on it, it will be influencing what we do.
I mean, from my point of view, I leave the writers to worry about that aspect of stories. I'll just try and do it as graphically as I possibly can. I think the way I certainly see the stories unfolding is the fact that we obviously have to have the conflict, and if it's going to be involved democracy and retribution and judgment, then sadly we are going to see it reflected around us. And the fact that, as we said all along, that this story started a few years ago, before the extremes that are happening in society, certainly in America, and Black Lives Matter, we saw that 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Unfortunately, it's, in the context of the way it's become a sweeping movement, we hadn't seen that 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So the idea of sort of like nothing I've certainly read in the script is related to anything that's going on at the moment. The fact that it actually is almost a parallel universe to what's going on at the moment, and we're getting conjoining points, is quite scary, because Mike has been trying to think of the darkest unfolding of what democracy will do. And I think the scary thing is when you think of how far democracy can be abused in the context of our guardians, in quotes, put up there. I can do that, can't I? I've just seen myself, sorry. So yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, Mike is completely and utterly right. There's no way we'd use reality, anything's happening in reality, and distill that down into a story that's just not feasible or possible, and it would be bad taste to do it. But it's amazing how sick writers can be and how close to reality they can actually take a storyline. So, yeah, I mean, completely and utterly agree with what Mike's saying and what Mike is saying.
And how do you see this series developing? Because, Mike, you've already talked about there being more on the way after this story. Obviously, this is running at a different pace to the Judge's novellas that you've been doing. Without being too spoilery, how do you see this developing, particularly as I'm sure real events may well begin to outpace the situation that you're showing in the strip?
Yeah, it'd be nice to it'd be nice to carry on for a few years anyway, a few seasons, if you like. Yeah, I've plotted out the next equivalent of about 5.5, 6 years of the characters plural lives. And I know where I want it to go, but how I actually go there does determine to some degree on whether or not the powers that be permit this story to happen. So far, I mean, I'm optimistic. I want to go. I think John knows a bit more than most people would about where this is going to go. Well, we're going to look at it. Really is it's the impact of the judges on society, but how it specifically affects 2 or 3 characters in this universe. I've toyed with the idea of having direct tie into the judges' novellas, but for the moment we're not doing that, other than a minor character in this series, Judge Deacon, who appears in my judges' books. He shows up, but yeah, I want to focus this one more on a small span of time rather than the judges, which are, as I say, they're every 3 books is a new decade. For example, I just delivered the my book for the judges in the 2050s. So that hopefully will be out sometime in the near future. So yeah, with Dreadnoughts, it's going to be more personal from that point of view, of following the same set of characters. For the most part, with the Judges' novellas, we're skipping ahead, new writers each decade, and new characters. And then hopefully the plan is when we catch up with Judge Dredd's time, then we go back and do individual one-off Judges' novellas. But right now with Dreadnoughts, it's more personal, I think, for me. Glover as a character is someone I've had in mind for a very long time, and I can't say why, but there's aspects of her background and her future that are it's something I've been tinkering with for a long time, and I'm enjoying writing her because she's quite different to anybody that we've seen before. Again, can't spoil too much, but come back to me in about 4 months' time when the episode 4 is out, and we'll have a bit more of an idea. So yeah, it's I must admit, I'm having a ball writing it. It's tremendous fun, but it is, as John says, it is quite scary because the real world is doing things that we're going, well, now we can't do that in our story because they've actually overtaken us. They've gone, the real world has done worse things than we can come up with sometimes. So it's it's been fun though so far.
I think for me the incredible thing is that it's so low key compared to the usual Megacity 1 stories. Because it's sort of like done from a very small section of this society, the present day society, more or less, as Mike was sort of like saying, 10, 15 years in the future is no time at all, and nothing will have changed. You know, it's like the cars will still have wheels and the buildings will sort of like still be square, more or less, you know. So all things like that, completely not recognizable. So for me, it's been an incredible journey in a way, discipline, because I hardly ever do straight lines in my drawings. They're usually curvy and bendy. But I remember when I worked in the studios with Steve Dillon, the thing he hated most was doing dogs and horses and cars, because he had to draw the bloody wheels. And to draw a round thing in perspective is a bloody pain in the butt. But the great thing is, I mean, the scene behind Mike there, I've walked down there on Google, because that's the city that it's set in, you know, the Dreadnoughts. And I would be able to, you could drop me in Buffalo, isn't it? Yeah. So I can walk around Buffalo now, because I'm more or less been there with Glover and the other judges. So I don't know where the compound is. I shouldn't have said the compound.
Oh, yeah.
Forget that one. I'll swear all the way out of this bit, so you have to delete everything. But yeah, no, it's hopefully I will grow with the story as well. And it's going to be really interesting to like add elements that people might recognise, visual elements that people will recognise, depending on where Glover goes from this point onwards. I'm not sure she's going to be staying in, is it Boulder?
Boulder, yeah, Boulder. Yeah.
I'm sure, I don't know if she's going to be staying in Boulder for the rest of her career, but I'm sure she isn't. So it's going to be interesting to see how she develops and where she goes visually. And plus the fact, the thing that I'm really enjoying about doing these judges is the fact there's like the great fun about doing the proper judges in the context of Mega City 1 is you can draw them hyper pumped up and muscular, and even the women's, you know, pneumatic boobs and all the rest of it. But I've really avoided that. I mean, I'm not really a fan of that. I mean, I am a fan of that, but I don't particularly, it's not my favourite form of drawing. I prefer a realism to the figure work, and the sort of like the Glover in particular is quite buff, but she's athletic rather than pumped up. So she's not a superhero. And that's the thing I like about doing these characters. There's not one over-pumped physique in the whole thing. They're also like look like us three, slightly pasty, overweight, middle-aged men. Well, one middle-aged man.
You think you're still middle-aged, yeah? Good man.
So yeah, it's great to do them that way.
That was one of the things I was going to ask about, whether there are any callbacks in your work to the kind of style that you had on things like Letter to a Democrat, or you know, kind of visual language that you were in any way intentionally echoing on this series?
No, weirdly enough, I haven't been able to use any reference for anything that I've ever done before in the 2000 AD universe. So it's actually been I've got a completely new set of sketch guidelines that I can go to now, and it's trying not to over pump even the bike. I mean, I'm not sure if Mike said a particular make of bike. I can't remember on reading the original outline, but I've used a mix of an Indian, I think, is one, and obviously a Harley Davidson. So it's actually a bike that you can actually possibly be able to get, you know, in your local auto shop. I remember it's like a biker saying to me, a guy I used to share a studio with, that's like the Judge Dredd bike you cannot turn corners with because the wheels are too wide. This bike that Glover's on, you'll be able to do all the tricks, wheelies and everything. So there's a realism for what I'm trying to depict in this particular world of the Dreadnoughts.
And in terms of, I mean, we've already talked a little bit about the future, but in terms of what you would like this series to represent in people's minds regarding the origins of the judges, and whether this has any kind of impact on how people view the main Judge Dredd series, storyline, arc, whatever. Mike, are you expecting this to be something that grows with the judges' novellas, and to which people can refer and look to as, you know, part of the canon, or is this you just exploring personal stories from the world that John and Alan created?
It's mostly exploring the personal stories, I think, because the big resonance events of Dredd's world are, you know, they're all established, they're set in stone, we know what they are. We know that the war happens with President Booth and all that sort of stuff. So that's a road that's not been travelled tremendously often, but it has been travelled. But what's not been travelled is how those events affect the individual characters. So with Dreadnoughts, I want to make it more personal for Glover and show how things affect her and her situation. That's one of the reasons we picked a small town, a comparatively small city of Boulder, rather than Los Angeles or Dallas, or I would love to write a story set in Dallas, but I wanted somewhere more suburban, more down to earth, more relatable, I think, to most people. And also because you don't often see science fiction story happening in a place where that still has a garden, place where people have hedges and trees, where you have wide streets but no skyscrapers. So the light is different. Everything feels different about it. And it brings it's more of a down home kind of quality. Nobody's impressed anymore with seeing skyscrapers that are 4 miles high in a science fiction movie, but we have a story set in a small town where not necessarily everybody knows everybody, but everybody knows the situation at least, and they're not all towering city blocks where everybody's being isolated and so on. So with Glover and her crew, I've been very careful not to say what's happening in this. We are much more. We're sitting, we're sort of following them, sitting behind them. They're driving us around this particular territory, and we're passengers, rather than us viewing things from a long distance like we would be in Dread's world necessarily. So yeah, in this case, it's much more personal. There will be some big events that they will react to, and again, it's more down to earth. And again, I go back to the analogy of the 2012 Carl Urban Judge Dredd movie rather than the 95 Stallone one. It is it's more about the cops rather than the world-changing events at the moment.
Well, thank you very much indeed to John and to Mike and to Dan and to Jack for chatting for this episode. We've got so much more to feature on the Thrillcast this month. It is an embarrassment of riches. So make sure you stay tuned, and we shall see you in a week's time, Earthlets. And until then, stay safe, as always, and Splendid Verthrig.
Alert! 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 Fill power levels dangerously high. Alert! Alert! Read 2000 AD every week. Ask your comic book store or newsagent now. Subscribe to the galaxy's greatest comic at 2000ADonline.com.